But I always try and remind people that what would you rather prefer to eat if you did want to eat meat? A piece of meat that was hacked off a living, breathing, feeling animal in the most disgusting environment, pumped full of hormones and antibiotics and steroids and goodness knows what else, in a really unclean environment, and then killed in the most horrific, abusive, terrifying way? Or would you like to consume a piece of meat that was grown by human beings in a sterile environment, which is completely clean, probably lower in saturated fat, and a tenth or even more of the environmental impact of that meat?
Mr. Lockie, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a pleasure to see you, as always.
Thank you. Yeah, and it was the other way around last time. I was on your podcast, so it's nice to return the favor somewhat.
Absolutely. I don't get to speak on other people's podcasts very often, so this is a nice treat for me. I have to take the back seat and not be in charge.
So, I mean, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, because you're kind of the epicenter of knowledge when it comes to plant-based news and what's going on in the world of plant-based, and have been for some time. So for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about you and what you do as it relates to plant-based news and some of your other work.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Thank you, Loui. Hi, everyone. I'm Robbie Lockie. I'm the co-founder and chief creative dog's body at Plant-Based News. I do a bit of everything, social media strategy, PR, innovation. I'm director of editorial as well, so my role is to sort of make sure the website keeps ticking over, news keeps appearing on the platform, and that we are focused on our mission, which is to educate and inspire as many people as possible to consider the plant-based lifestyle, and not only consider it, but stick with it as well. And we like to focus on facts and credible information about the lifestyle itself. We obviously cover a wide variety of subjects, from like animal welfare to environmental protection to celebrity content. That is unfortunately our most popular type of content, celebrity content, because people love to hear what their favorite celebs are up to. And my role really is just focused really around keeping the content flowing through the platform and working closely with my business partner and brother from another mother, Mr. Klaus Mitchell, who I run the platform alongside. He is also a co-director and founder of the platform. So that's us in a bit of a nutshell. We're on all the social platforms and creating video content. I've got a podcast on general sort of podcasts on all the same sort of topics. And we've been running for about 7 years now, and quite kind of blown away by where we've got to. It's been quite an experience. I never in a million years thought that I would be a professional vegan. 10 years ago, if you said to me, 10 years ago, if you said to me I'd be a professional vegan working in a vegan media platform, I would have definitely laughed in your face. So it's been a surreal journey, and I've been able to meet some incredible people, and it's just such a special and wonderful thing to be involved in.
An interesting time, because your journey through being vegan and having a vegan business is correlated with the rise of veganism, and somewhat has, I would definitely suggest has encouraged the growth and adoption of plant-based diets around the world. Let's give some context to when you say the scale of this has surprised you. Can you give some context as to the numbers? And please don't underplay it, because I know you're usually very, very humble with this kind of thing. But just so people understand the scale and the reach that plant-based news has.
Yeah,
give us some of the numbers.
Oh, I mean, when we first started, there was not a lot going on, and it was the early days of like social media for us, 2015, 2016. And it was an exciting time because, social media was such a new thing. Everyone was really unsure about what was going to happen with social media and how big it was going to get. But we started creating content, writing articles and producing video content right from the beginning. I come from a digital media background, worked in agencies for most of my life, producing video content, building websites, doing user experience design. So I had lots of different skills that I could use to help build the platform alongside Klaus. And before, I would say within the first year and a half, everything completely exploded, and the traffic went from 3,000 unique visitors a month to 100,000, and then 200, and then 400, and then at the peak of our traffic was 1 million uniques a month to our website. Today, We reach on a good month about 85 to 90 million impressions every single month with our socials. So it's roughly between those two numbers, and then our social following is almost 3.5 million people. So it's been, quite an interesting ride. We've still got a very, very small team. I would love to be able to double our growth and double our team numbers, but there's not big money in vegan. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, but there's not big money in vegan media. Like people think, we're living in the lap of luxury sometimes, working in this sort of like sexy, glossy media landscape, but it's a real grind. And I really don't think people really understand the sacrifice and the sort of, the time it takes to produce what we have to do, what we create on a daily basis. So I'm very proud of the platform. Those numbers are obviously huge. They sometimes feel a little bit, immaterial sometimes because we all work every day behind our computers in our bedrooms or our spare rooms or our sort of co-working offices, and we don't really get to interact with the audience as much as I would like to. Sometimes when we go to events like Vegan Camp Out or to the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit in LA, people have come up to us. Myself recently in LA, a few people came up to me and were praising the work, and that's always a bit of a shock because you get real human beings coming over, and rather than comments at the bottom of an Instagram post, you've got a real person coming in and talking to you about how the work that you've done has completely changed their life or has inspired them to do something, or encourage them to quit their job and start their own business. So that's the type of stuff that I live for, and that's the stuff I love, really. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
Amazing. Yeah, and I think before to build 3 million followers, for example, on any topic, it is impressive, let alone something that's as contentious and perhaps deemed still as niche as veganism. So obviously very adept at social media marketing, at building audience, at content, etc. Before we go into kind of how it started, so I think that'd be really useful for people to hear. Can you talk about the various sectors that plant-based news works in? Because it's not just general media anymore, is it? You also look at things like food, business, and other sectors. Can you talk about how the business covers different areas?
Yeah, so plant-based news is a media platform where we call ourselves impact media, meaning that it's a media with purpose. So we don't just cover the news just to make money from advertising. We are covering stories that are about the social change of the food system, which obviously intersects with many different things. So animal agriculture, we talk about how the effects of animal agriculture is having on the planet from an environmental perspective. We talk about humanity and society, so all the different types of celebrities that are adopting the lifestyle and the effects that they're having on the community by starting businesses or investing in things. For example, take like Lewis Hamilton, for example, putting huge amounts of money behind a burger company in the UK, and how his kind of support for that has allowed it to grow exponentially. So those are kind of stories people always love. We obviously cover business and investment news a lot. There's huge amounts of money being poured into plant-based, and we also talk a little bit about cellular agriculture, which isn't plant-based, but it is kind of part of the alt protein sector. We can talk about that, and that's kind of such an interesting conversation because it's very polarizing. A lot of people are, well, especially vegans, are super suspicious of cell-based meat or cellular agriculture. And so I think personally believe that it's really important, I know Class supports this, is that we need to get people on board with these technologies because they are a solution to ending animal agriculture, which is such a destructive force on our planet. There's a big part of what we talk about. Then there's also things like pandemic risk, where factory farming, where we breed thousands of animals in huge quantity, thousands of animals in large amounts in small spaces where superbugs are being bred. We talk a lot about that, about various different H5N1 viruses escaped from a farm, and it's been found in like 2 people. And it's important that people know that these super farms, these CAFOs as they call them in America, are breeding grounds for potentially the next pandemic. So that's a big part of our conversation as well. And then obviously things like food innovation and food tech, when there's lots of exciting new products on the scene, like a plant-based salmon or a tuna or something like that, people want to try these new things and see what they're like. So we want to be there telling that story and talking about those companies, either on plantbasednews.org or on PBN Food on our Instagram page, on social media. Those are always very popular stories. So that's a kind of roundabout list. There's obviously probably stuff I've forgotten, but we do try and cover as much as possible. We've got a very small team. We've only got 2 writers. And it's not easy to keep up with the volume. And I mean, my inbox on a daily basis is exploding with requests for press. People want earned media every day, and that's a challenge to navigate all of that, because we want to help and support lots of. Sorry,
there's an authenticity. That's why, right? That's why, because you said it's impact media. There's an authenticity to it. It's not bought. You're not being bought by someone to push an agenda. It's you're literally reporting on what's actually happening. The reason I bring it up as well in terms of the diversity of the topics you speak about is because you've managed to, someone, you could say, oh, well, you've built a Instagram account and a website around PBN and it's grown and you caught the wave. You've built an audience because it was popular, but the fact that you've been able to replicate it with PBN Food, what are the followers there?
Like about 205,000.
Food and right. So there's obviously a strategy that you guys deploy, and there's a thought process behind it to engage such a large audience and to retain their attention for that distance. So let's take it back. Let's go back to when you and I first met, maybe almost 10 years ago now. Early days of kind of the vegan movement in London, when there was groups of us meeting in small venues and doing small talks basically for each other. And those rooms were the genesis of a lot of the businesses that people see in supermarkets and see online as businesses and people that lead this space now. At that time, obviously PBN wasn't this big kind of media brand that it is now and had the visibility. How then, if someone's listening to this thinking, I live in a country where perhaps veganism isn't as popular, or I've got an idea for a media brand or a digital brand that I want to grow in plant-based, and I'm not quite sure where to start or how to get the message across. What were some of the important things that you think have enabled PBN to grow from a standing start to millions of people following online, millions of impressions? Such a large impact. What are some of the maybe important things?
I get asked this question a lot, actually, and I don't have a really advanced answer. But what I will say, it's quite simple for me. It's not easy, but it's quite simple. It's showing up every day. We are consistent in what we do. I take huge pride in the work that we do, making sure that everything is fact checked, making sure that everything is consistent. In the early days, everything was a bit of a mess. There wasn't much consistency brand wise. And now, all our content has fantastic thumbnails. It has amazing headlines. All the colors are on brand. The logo is always in the right place. Attention to detail is a big part of, I think, what we do. You go to our socials or our website and you will find news and media every single day. And I think the same can be applied for a business. If you are using social media as a way to connect with your customers, you need to be there. You need to turn up in the comments. When people are asking questions, you need to answer them. You need to show that you care about you need to show that you care, ultimately. I've been running this business for 7 years with Klaus, and you will still find me in the DMs of our Instagram answering people's questions about veganism, about diets, about nutrition. No task is below me, in my opinion. Like, as a director, I would be happy to be in the post room putting stamps on if they needed me. I just think that it can be very easy to start a small business and then start hiring some people and sort of create a very strong, powerful hierarchy where you place yourself above everyone else. And then, there's a sort of this level of importance, and you kind of neglect all the important stuff because you kind of offload too much onto your subordinates, I suppose. I think, the biggest thing for me is just consistency, attention to detail, and of course, goes without saying, great people. Your company or your organization can't function if it doesn't have good people under you that you can trust, who can take your vision and deliver it. We still have a very small team. Our social team is only 3 people, and there's a lot to manage, and most of the time we don't get to everything. but they work very hard. They really care about the brand. They care about the mission. They're mission aligned in that sense. I'm not saying you have to always hire people who are mission aligned, but I think it really, really helps, because those people will, when they come into work and they put in that extra half hour here and there, they're doing it because they really care about what you're trying to achieve as an organization. So I think if I could switch it around, I would say it's the people on top, actually. And then it's the other stuff, the consistency, the attention to detail, you know, all the obvious stuff. But I think it's hiring really good people, and that's really hard. Finding great people within your company and trusting them with your kind of baby is it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure.
Completely agree. Yeah, completely agree. I think the mission, the point about being mission aligned, when you're showing up because you genuinely believe in the work that you're doing, and you understand the magnitude of the importance of the work that you're doing, then you bring a different energy to it. And collectively, if you're all sharing that vision and that motivation to pursue that mission, then it makes a big difference to work, right? It makes the work more enjoyable. It makes the work more consistent. It makes it more impactful. I think it's a really great point. Before, one of the things I want to get into with you is the more, I guess, contentious points and in the news at the moment that you see, and perhaps you see, that are going to come out and come in the coming months and years. But maybe for a bit of fun first, what's the most kind of viral, the most I guess the most well-received piece of news that PBN has put out, or campaign? What, if you think back, what's the kind of something that you guys have done, or something you've reported on that was quite big news?
Gosh, I mean, it's usually the controversial stuff that gets the most attention. I wouldn't say it's always positive.
Right.
You know, it's usually things like, you know, the European Union is trying to ban the use of the word milk and cheese and mayo and things like that from vegan companies. It's anything that causes outrage. Also, some of the biggest stories really are animal welfare stories, animals being mistreated. Like, for example, Lolita, who died recently. She was a beautiful orca who was imprisoned in SeaWorld, and she was there for 53 years. And she died a couple of days ago. And it's those kind of stories about individuals who, and really connect with people, vegans and non-vegans, because, you know, ultimately most people are animal lovers and they care about these things, and it does make them feel sad and angry. So it's mostly those kind of stories about big organizations, you know, using their brute force. When Oatly forced a smaller company to change their name, Oatly, I think it was, that got a huge amount of attention and a lot of people angry. Oatly was also in hot water when they took investment from BlackRock. You know, those types of stories as well, when people think they can trust a brand or an organization and then it does something that seems to be out of alignment with our ethics. Also big stories for controversy. And then obviously there's also the contentious subjects like cell-based meat, precision fermentation. People are concerned about whether these things are something that humans should consume or not. So everyone's got a very strong opinion. I think any content where people can inject their opinion, that's going to get a lot of fire on social media and a lot of the comment sections blowing up.
And I think it's how you deliver that in a measured way, right? It's like how you, as essentially an impartial platform, deliver that news in a way where you present the facts, as you said, and then you allow for conversation, and because that's ultimately what we need. We need almost like unemotional conversation where people can put forward a perspective or an idea in an environment that's safe, where different views are accepted, and there can be a discussion, and hopefully some progress can be made as to some solutions, which I think leads me really nicely onto the cell-based conversation. And I think you and I have spoken about this at length in person previously, and we both kind of have our own perspectives on things. But as it relates to alternative sources of protein, perhaps we can start just by stating for people that are unaware what we mean by cell-based or precision fermentation. And then we can perhaps talk about the, you know, where this space is going and what perhaps the positives and the negatives.
So cellular agriculture or cell-based meat, or by the media, which is erroneously calls it lab-grown meat. It's not grown in a lab, actually. It's grown in something that's more like a brewery, is a technology that has been around for many, many decades, but it is being scaled up to allow us to be able to mass produce cell-based foods. So think steaks, chicken breasts, full cut salmon steaks, anything where you have a chunk of meat or protein or flesh from not from an animal. And what that means is we can take a biopsy from a chicken, a cow, a pig, or a human, frankly, and we can take those cells and we can kind of cause them to grow in a specific way, which will trigger the cell division process. And what that does is it basically creates tissue, and over time, grown in a specific type of liquid, which activates that cell growth. Those cell structures will form like a sort of pulpy, fleshy lump, and it sounds absolutely disgusting, but once it's kind of, collected and then reformed, it can be turned into any kind of animal protein. Now, we are calling this a new type of food, and it's animal-free food because it's not from an animal specifically. It's grown outside of the animal. It's the same with precision fermentation, which is a new and also a different type of technology, also not new. It's being used for centuries. It's been used for decades to produce things like rennet, which were originally produced in the stomach of baby calves, which is really disgusting, harvested from the stomach of baby calves for making cheese. Now it's made with microbes. So precision fermentation is microbes that can make protein for us for like things like cheese, milk, yogurt. And then cellular agriculture is where we take a cell from an animal and we use a sort of brewing type technique to cause those cells to proliferate and create flesh. It's a very controversial subject, obviously, because people think of it as Frankensteinian. It's something that's kind of absolutely disgusting. But I always try and remind people that what would you rather prefer to eat if you did want to eat meat? A piece of meat that was hacked off a living, breathing, feeling animal in the most disgusting environment, pumped full of hormones and antibiotics and steroids and goodness knows what else, in a really unclean environment, and then killed in the most horrific, abusive, terrifying way? Or would you like to consume a piece of meat that was grown by human beings in a sterile environment, which is completely clean, probably lower in saturated fat, and a tenth or even more of the environmental impact of that meat? So, I think for me, the choice is obvious. I personally wouldn't eat it. I've been vegan for 12 years. I don't feel the need to eat flesh, but I would support those who do want to eat meat to eat it because it is an incredibly environmentally friendly solution, as well as hopefully in the long term be cheaper, and it uses a fraction of the land. So it just makes sense to me, but there's a lot of fear around it, and kind of we do our best to write about it wherever we can. I would love to be doing more. I would love to be educating more people about this technology. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are being poured into it every single year to try and bring it to market. It was just recently approved by the FDA in the United States. So it's like a gold rush now. Companies are diving on it in the US, and we will see the rest of the world following suit. I know the Chinese government is putting a lot of money behind it. They want to halve their meat consumption by 2030, I want to say. So there's a lot of support for it, but also a lot of fear. And that's just education, I think.
And I think it's fair to say that on a cellular level, it is meat. Mm-hmm. It is meat. The biopsy is coming from an animal, although the animal isn't harmed. The biopsy is coming from the animal, and on a cellular level, it is meat. It's just the process to get it to the table doesn't involve the use of an animal. And I think the thing that people forget, and I have this conversation fairly often, is that it's not just when we talk about the environmental impact of industrial animal agriculture, and indeed any animal agriculture, it's not just things like people say, oh, it's just cow farts or it's water. You have to consider the amount of food that's needed to be grown. And very often the way this food is grown is through incredibly damaging methods. It's large scale monocropping with the rampant use of pesticides, herbicides, etc. We're growing a huge amount of food to take an animal from a cow, for example, from the size of a calf all the way to a mature cow. The amount of animal feed that's required to go through that process is huge. Obviously, that food needs to grow somewhere. That food in itself requires land. It requires, and as a result, the destruction of habitat. It requires water. It requires chemicals. So there's this whole other process that goes into raising an animal outside of just the mere kind of animal itself. And with cell-based food, we negate the need for the additional crops to be grown, which actually creates more space for more food for humans, because we're still at a point where we don't actually, we still have starvation globally, right? And I understand there's a more nuanced economic reasons for that than simply that the food's being redirected, but it would free up a huge amount of land to grow food. And so personally, it's why my position on it is that I think it's an incredible technology. I think for those that want to eat meat, it serves a purpose in a much more environmentally friendly way. And let's talk about this processed thing that the big ag is using at the moment as a kind of a way to
unnatural,
kind of denounce the proteins. Yes, but the process isn't necessarily bad. It means that we can adapt foods to actually be healthier, cleaner. To your point about these environments, very often they have a host of different pathogens. We require antibiotics to be used at scale, which is another huge issue which we can touch on. And so I actually think for those that want to eat meat, it can be not only be a more sustainable option, but it can actually be a healthier option as well. When it comes to other things, in terms of why this may be a good technology, let's talk a little bit about antibiotics, for example, and what's happening with the use of antibiotics globally at the moment, because many people are hugely misinformed or indeed uninformed about the use of antibiotics and the sheer scale that's happening at. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The scale is off the charts. 80% of all antibiotics given in most countries go to farmed animals. And these antibiotics are often given under the guise of disease prevention, when actually they're being used to increase growth rates of animals. Many people don't know this, but when you give antibiotics to creatures like chickens and pigs, they grow faster. I don't know the biomechanical mechanism behind why antibiotics cause animals to grow faster, but they do something to the biochemistry of the animal which causes them to increase in size and volume. And it's often done as a way to make more money, to sell more fleshy animals, as it were. Now, what's happening is that these animals are being pumped full of antibiotics on a daily. These bacterium, because antibiotics act on bacterium, not viruses, they become desensitized to that bacterium. So the antibiotics are injected into the animals or given through their food, and so the bacterium become basically immune or resistant to the medicines, to the antibiotics that have been given to those animals on a regular basis. Because they're given small amounts regularly, the microbes become resistant, and so that is a huge problem. MRSA, microbial resistance bacteria, is a huge problem. It can kill and does kill millions of people, and is going to kill millions more people every single year, because these antibiotics are becoming resistant to these bugs. We're creating and breeding these superbugs. All you need is someone to be able to have a cut on their finger. They've got a piece of chicken that they've got from the supermarket, and that chicken might rub that cut, that bacteria, which has been found on many supermarket chicken servings, fresh raw chicken. Many of these MRSA superbugs have been found on these products. All you need to do is for that to get into your bloodstream. You end up in a hospital, and nothing will be able to help you. No antibiotics will be able to save you. Those bacterium will proliferate in your blood, and they will kill you. So, it is a massive, massive problem. Not enough people are talking about it. In fact, 9 years ago, I made a film about it called Swine, that I made with Viva, the animal rights charity here in the UK, and it was sort of supported and performed. One of the characters in it was Tim Sheaf. Any of those who remember Tim Sheaf, he was one of the main characters in it. And it told a story, initially a fictional story, of a young journalist who was going undercover to investigate what was happening on a factory farm, and these pigs that are becoming mutant pigs. Obviously, that was a fictional part of the story, but it went on to really show how, these superbugs have the power to kill a lot of people and cause a lot of damage to our society. And the reason there is an issue with antibiotics is that there is no commercial incentive to make antibiotics. For humans, they are often a very short course. You take them for 10 days, 5 days, or whatever. So big pharmaceutical companies don't have any incentive to make any new antibiotics. There's a few in our cupboard, you could say, that are like our last kind of resort against major kind of infections. but they are quickly running out. More and more superbugs are appearing and becoming resistant to all the different antibiotics we have in our arsenal. And so, yeah, like, and animal agriculture needs to end before it ends us, as we say.
Yeah, I think it's one of those huge issues that just isn't spoken about enough. Beyond the environmental issues that we face, it is the resistance of antibiotics, and when it comes to us needing them for us, we'll be at a stage where a lot of these, as you say, diseases are already resistant to the antibiotics that we want to use, and so it's another huge risk beyond the other abundant health risks that we speak about. You hear a lot as well. We've spoken a little bit about sustainability there, about environment. When it comes to health, I know that PBN puts out some really good stuff around health, and we know that I think 9 of the 10 major killers, or the top 10 things that people die from globally, are all essentially lifestyle related. We know that consumption of ultra processed meat is carcinogenic. We know that it's a cause of heart disease. We know it's a cause of cancer, etc. What's the most impactful news that you've seen recently, or that you can reference as it relates to health? Because it still seems to be a point of contention. You still have all of these, Instagram experts talking about carnivore diet this or keto diet that. What's some of the news you've seen around health that's been kind of particularly impactful to
the first thing that comes to mind is New York. The mayor of New York is a plant-based mayor, very passionate about people eating more plant-based food, and he has supported an initiative across hospitals across New York. Eric Adams, Mayor Eric Adams. He has supported an initiative which has created a process where meals in the hospitals are by default are plant-based. So across the whole of New York State, if you go to a hospital and you're unwell, you will be offered several plant-based options, and then the final option will be a meat-based meal. So it's seen huge success. I don't have the statistics to hand, but I know that it has been a wonderful success, and there isn't anyone kind of forcing these meals on anyone. They're just providing it as the default option. And most people are choosing the plant-based option over the meat option. So it's really inspiring to hear that places like hospitals, which are places of healing, people are thinking about, nourishing their patients with healthy plant-based foods rather than, stuffing them full of steaks and chips and, all kinds of other kind of very unhealthy, animal-rich food. So that's one of the biggest stories, I think, at the moment. I'm trying to think what other ones of health. I would say the work that PCRM does, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, definitely look them up. They are constantly suing the American government, taking them on for various different kind of issues, that are being kind of going to be addressed, whether it's like in a schooling system where kids are being forced to drink dairy and there's no plant-based milk options, to encouraging the government to put warning labels on things like bacon, which is obviously a processed meat. It is a class 1 carcinogen. If cigarettes are carcinogenic and a class 1 carcinogen, and they have warnings on their packets, then bacon should too, so they are lobbying for these kinds of changes. So a fantastic organization. Please do check them out and support them. So yeah, those are a couple of stories that I can think of.
Amazing. Yeah, I think it's so important that we are able to talk about examples where, from around the world, and I think that's the great thing what PBN does, is it shares examples from around the world of initiatives, because it helps people localize these ideas and help to implement them on a local level. Both you and I are part of this plant-based alliance, and I know we took a lot of inspiration from the work that's been done in the Netherlands with the Dutch government to help promote plant-based diets. I know that locally in Dubai, where I'm partially based, that the government are actively pushing plant-based diets for sustainability and to combat obesity. So I think it's really inspiring and really important that we're able to have access to these great initiatives that are going on a global level. It shows the progress that's being made. We're particularly lucky in the UK, I think, and a lot of good work's been done, but we've seen a huge rise in the adoption of plant-based diets in the UK, and PBN has reported on those statistics. where else have you seen as being that's had enjoyed kind of a surge in kind of plant-based adoption, and what do you kind of put that
It's a
down
good
to?
question. I mean, when you look at our statistics, the biggest and most popular kind of traffic sources are United States, the UK, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. I think it's predominantly down to access to information, educational content. Unfortunately, most of the educational content is only in English, and so I think there is a huge untapped opportunity out there in the world where there are many people who speak Spanish, or speak Mandarin, or speak Nepalese, and they don't have access to this information. And Western diets, the kind of high animal food, processed food diets are creeping into other countries around the world. Take Thailand, for example, a predominantly Buddhist country, where most people didn't traditionally eat a lot of meat. But because of sort of, Western influence, more and more people are eating things like burgers and burgers and bacon, sausages, all these very heavily processed foods. Often the main reason being is that for manufacturers, processed foods allow for longer shelf lives, which means you can produce vast quantities of this stuff and store them in warehouses, and they can sit there for months and sometimes, if not years, or probably centuries in the case of Twinkies. So for me, it's education. It's these, we're seeing a surge in these countries because of the resources. There are things like plant-based news, veg news. Trying to think of any other vegan media platforms. There are not that many anymore. Most of them, unfortunately, have gone west, gone south. What's the expression? Gone under. I shouldn't laugh. It's unfortunate. It's not a good thing that other vegan media platforms have gone under. We need more people doing this work. We reach, our website at the moment gets between 400 to 500,000 uniques a month, which seems like a big number, but when you think about how many people are in the UK, 66 million, that's a tiny drop in the ocean. We have a long way to go until we reach enough people for it to have meaningful change. Now, obviously, we're having some change, and we're maybe moving the needle a little, but for us to have like widespread change, we need to be hitting 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million uniques a month on our website, and getting to a lot more people. And that that requires more resources and more time and more support from the community, which unfortunately, not to throw shade, we don't get a lot of support. I think for all the kind of work that we do, and we provide a free service, and we have done every day for 7 years, the sort of support that we get from the community is minimal. It's in the low hundreds of pounds a month. And it costs huge amounts of money to run PBN every month. And so we've had to find other ways to support the platform. So, that's one of the things that is the most difficult, is running a media platform that is providing a free service, and then still being able to maintain it and grow it so that it can reach into those countries. Because I'd love to be able to have a Spanish plant-based news, and a Portuguese one, and a French one. But that requires, a lot of people and money and resources.
What would you say that as would be obvious, you see a lot of news come through. Obviously, you're reporting every day, as you said, consistently on what's happening in the world. What are you most excited about at the moment? Like, what kind of motivates you? Because for those that do follow kind of a plant-based lifestyle, or have been vegan for a long time, it can sometimes feel very frustrating at the rate that things are moving, particularly when you look through the lens of from an environmental lens, through an animal lens, certainly.
Right.
But what motivates you at the moment? What are you particularly excited about that you see?
I think the biggest thing that excites me, and you're right, like, people are consuming more meat than ever before. If you do look at the data and the statistics, it is depressing. But we can't lose hope, right? Because we have these incredible technologies waiting in the wings. Cellular agriculture and precision fermentation are two things that could completely revolutionize the food system. Now, in our kind of idealized world, we want everyone to be eating like plant-based burgers and bean burritos, but human beings are addicted to eating meat. We have been eating it for 200,000 years. It's been a part of our culture for such a long time. And the vegan movement has, I'm not going to say it's failed, but it hasn't reached the critical mass that it needs to in the last 45 to 50 years. We've had a huge surge in recent years because of social media and media like documentaries and impact media like plant-based news. But to be able to reach the numbers we need to, we need millions and millions and millions of pounds poured into these kinds of platforms, and we're just not getting that. So the alternative is to meet people where they're at, which is their demand for meat, and provide them with products that taste the same, look the same, function the same way as they are used to, ideally at the same price or cheaper, in a way that's healthier and more environmentally friendly. Obviously, we're up against a massive monster here, because animal ag is continuously pumping out misinformation, not just about plant-based meats, but about cellular agriculture, about precision fermentation. There is a huge problem ahead with trying to make that change, create that change, get the consumer to switch to these products, because obviously it's all very well saying, try these new innovative products, they are better for the environment. But when people close their eyes and they think, lab grown meat, because the media won't shut up about lab grown meat, people are not going to buy it because they're afraid of it. They are kind of put off by the idea of eating something that they in their minds visualize being grown in a lab. So I'm excited about these technologies, quietly excited about them. There's so much money being poured into them. There's companies left, right, and center that are opening up, from South Africa to the US, Australia, New Zealand, India. Even people are jumping on board with these technologies. And I think if they can be given the support and the political support and the investment that they need, they could wipe out animal agriculture. And in the next sort of 20 years or so, we could see an end to these industries. I'm not talking about small farms. I think people will continue to farm animals on a small scale in the future, but I do believe we get the political will to end industrialized animal agriculture and industrialized aquaculture. We can't forget about the fish. It could be the solution to everything we need. But as you know, we are living in the midst of a climate breakdown, and we don't have the time, and that's the big elephant in the room. Climate crisis is real. It's happening. All you need to do is spend some time on YouTube and look at all the things going on around the planet right now. The planet is fucking on fire, as several people have said in the media, to much of the dismay of their hosts. And apologies for swearing, but it's an emergency, and these tools, these technologies, these industries are the solutions. But we are just dealing with human psychology here, and it's so difficult.
Yeah, I think what I love that you said there, and let's keep that kind of that the internal optimism that we need, because we work in this space, and we're very fortunate. As much as we work very hard to do what we do, we both of us work doing something that we love doing something that's impactful for us. And one thing you said there, which really resonated, was there's so many problems to solve. There's so many things that we need to do and do quickly. That, to me, as an entrepreneur, and you being an entrepreneur as well, speaks to me in a way that's like, okay, how do we get on and solve this problem? And so there's people listening out there that perhaps they'd love to work full time in this space. They'd love to have a business in this space. They'd love to be able to wake up every day and contribute to changing the world for the better. Where do you see the opportunities today? Because for me, I work in alternative protein. I think there's a lot of that space kind of feels a bit saturated at the moment. It's super competitive. You need huge funding to start. The media space is, again, very competitive, growing, but very competitive. Where do we need decisive action now? Where do you see that there are problems to be solved that entrepreneurs out there, or would-be entrepreneurs out there, could show up?
I think one of the biggest challenges people face is convenience. They want to eat better. They want to make better choices for their families. There are companies like All Plants who obviously are juggernauts in the space of ready-made meals, but there are all kinds of interesting platforms available online today where you can start making food in your own kitchen, in whether it's jarred food or jams or sauces, anything really. You can start small and start experimenting with producing products on a small scale and then testing them on audiences. There's a platform called Deli, which I don't know how long it's been around, but quite a few of my friends are starting to experiment with putting products on there and sort of testing the waters. I think when it comes to like starting your own business, it can be incredibly overwhelming, and a lot of people don't know where to begin. I think you have to lean into like what your passions are. If it is food, then I would say one needs to start experimenting with a few products and testing them on friends and family, something that you feel is a gap, there's a gap missing. So a very silly one of mine, for example, is when I was non-vegan, I love Jaffa cakes. I literally ate them all the time. There are no decent vegan Jaffa cakes anywhere, and this is a very popular British treat, and that's just like one small thing. I would say that people need to be looking at supermarkets and trying to understand where there are opportunities, especially in traditional, culturally popular foods. How can we veganize them? And, if you don't have any business experience, one does have to start small. We have to start experimenting with friends and family, going to local markets, setting up stalls, testing how people react to the foods that you have veganized. It's very hard. I mean, I do get asked this question a lot as well. How do I start? Where do I begin? Because, I experienced it even with my own family. My dad wants to run a vegan business. He's super passionate. He's been vegan for several years. He's 65. He's like, I want to do a vegan business. I've got all these ideas, but it does require, these days you've got to do everything. You've got to do your marketing. You've got to do your invoicing. You've got to do your product production. You've got to do your PR. It really requires a lot of skills to be able to, unless you've got the money and the backing, you've got to be able to do everything and have, multiple hats. So I think if you are an entrepreneur, you have to look for gaps. And I would say start in supermarkets, look at products that are popular. Use AI, for example. Bing search uses ChatGPT-4. Register on Bing, install Microsoft Edge browser, and you get access to Microsoft Bing. It uses ChatGPT-4, which we can talk about. It's an amazing AI which allows you to communicate with a search engine. You can have a conversation with a search engine. That's essentially it. It's incredible. You can go on there and ask it to search and find trends for you in foods. There's lots of like market research data available that allows you to, like, reports available that talk about like what are the hot new trends. My personal kind of where I think people need to be focused are on the animal foods. If you have the resourcing and the funding, we should be focused on single cut foods like, steaks and chicken breasts and salmon what they call salmon steaks, things like that. And then obviously also precision fermentation with the likes of milk and cheese and yogurt. I mean, there's nothing really happening in the UK market wise. Like, there's obviously a lot of R&D going on in the UK, but we still haven't got anything anywhere near ready for market in this country, not the least that I've experienced or seen. So, have I lost you? Oh, your video went off for a sec. I think that it's a really difficult question. There's so much.
I think there's a couple of bits that I'll pull out there that are really, really valid points. I think the first one is to make measured decisions as to what you go into. So to your point, there is a ton of data out there now, more than ever, that shows what people are searching, what people are interested in, where the opportunity might be. So I think, to really lean into that and make a measured approach, but balanced with what you are truly interested and passionate about. Because if you're doing something purely because there's a demand for it and you're not particularly interested in it, when it gets to midnight and you're still packing boxes, you will get bored and put it down.
Yeah.
I think the second thing that I'll say is, and you spoke about this in terms of starting small. It doesn't need to be the next Beyond Meat.
No.
You can run it, and I've got many friends that run vegan businesses that they make a living. It's a decent business. They're not making millions and millions every year, but they're making it there. They're doing something that they really care about, that they connect with, that affords them a good living, and they're working full time on something that makes an impact and that they love. And I would argue that that's a far better place to be in than making a ton more money doing something that you hate.
That's so
true. And I would suggest that, this return to a localized way of commerce is super sustainable because you're within your local vicinity. It's manageable because you're not going through the stress of large scale logistics and such. And it means that you can create more time and more space to do other things away from just the work. So I think there's definitely something to be said for that. I'd also encourage people that perhaps are in areas that they deem to be behind, shall we say. That's something I hear a lot. I live in city X or country Y and there's not many vegans, there's not many options. Great. what an opportunity. It's underserviced, you know, and I think what we have to think about in this space is there is a need to not just service an audience, but to create demand as well. How do you create demand? You put out educational content, you inspire people, you motivate people, you think creatively, and this is the work. You know, this is how we help to change things. We don't just want to go after people that are already there. I think you and I have spoken of this before, the frustration sometimes where, you know, we've been in this for a long time. We did a lot of the groundwork in educating people, in building audience. And it can feel a little bit disheartening when companies then start 5 years later and come in purely just to scoop up a lot of the customer base that you've created. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, we're trying to push things forward, make progress things. And, you know, I think ultimately there needs to be enough good things in the market to service that demand. The more products, the more companies, the more people there are, the more the quality improves through competition. I think there's such a thing as collaborative competition. You know, I think it's great that there's so many alternative protein brands in the space, for example. It makes me up my game. I have to have a better product because there's other people. And ultimately, you want the customers to have the best products they can possibly have, because that's how we increase adoption. So no, I think they're really, really, really valid points. And I do believe that the more entrepreneurs coming into this space, the better, because, you know, entrepreneurship is essentially creative solutions to problems. We have many, many problems in this space. And so we need entrepreneurs to solve those problems. And they tend to act far quicker than governments or big entities do.
No, definitely. I think just to carry on from your point about like community, I think, you know, it's all very well going on creating a product, but I think if you don't build a community around your product or a kind of, you know, brand advocates, it doesn't really mean there's not much longevity in what you're doing. I think that's the biggest part of PBN that's helped us, which is our community. We have fostered a community of people who really care about what it is that we're doing. We probably need to engage with them more if we're going to get some more support from them. And that's always something that can be improved. But I think, yeah, it's a really good question for entrepreneurs, is to think about who is your community? Who are the people that you wishing to serve? Who is the kind of target audience? And doing your kind of, you know, looking at the personas, I suppose, all the different types of people that you may be looking to sell to, and really getting under the skin of these people and understanding who they are.
And there's niches within this niche now, right? You know, at first, you know, it would have been okay maybe 10 years ago to service people that are interested in plant-based food. That would have been maybe enough in some areas 10 years ago. But now, with the rate of adoption where it is, we can niche down somewhat into plant-based food and say, okay, my community is going to be plant-based runners. I'm interested in running. I'm plant-based myself. That subsection of a plant-based community is growing. There's the vegan runners group, for example. You know, the who are always out running together with the attire, etc. So there are subsections of plant-based now that can align with particular interests that people can potentially tap into. I think there's so much of that.
Yeah, there is. And I think it's about like putting yourself into those environments where you can meet these people, going to those veg fests, going to those, vegan campouts, and going and connecting with people and talking to people, doing sort of like on the street interviews, going into a major city and literally stopping and asking people questions. You know, would you buy this, or would you ever be interested in this service? Or I've got an idea for this app. Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? I think a lot of entrepreneurs are worried about talking about their ideas because they're worried someone's going to steal their ideas. And I always say to them, don't be worried about people stealing their ideas. Let people steal your idea. Let's like, you know, being first to market isn't always a good thing. You know, just go at your own pace, you know, and deliver your product or your service as quickly as you can, of course. But you do need to do market research. You do need to understand the audience, the customer base. You need to understand it amazes me the number of people who start businesses and start things and don't understand, have no view over like who they are selling to. They just have an idea, they get a bunch of money, they make something, but then they don't really know who the target customer is at all.
It comes back to being mission aligned. I think the easiest problem to solve is your own problem. Pretty much any business that I've had is stemmed as a result of wanting to solve my own problem. Scratch your own itch, right?
Yeah.
I come across or any business I've invested in typically typically most of the time is a problem that I've experienced myself, and it's a solution that I would use. Therefore, I can relate to it and I can empathize with the potential customer, because at some time I felt like that, right? So I think that makes it a lot easier, let's say. To start to round up, because I want to be respectful of your time. What are some of the things that that you are kind of pursuing now with PBN? Like, where do you see PBN going over the next, the rest of this year into next year? What are some of the things that you're excited about, both within PBN and perhaps the PBN may be reporting on?
I guess starting off within PBN, our plan is to grow our editorial team to ideally try and double the size of our team and hopefully the reach of the team. And focus on being that impact-driven media, focus on being very fact-based, ethically focused organization, which is all about solutions. And then, getting more involved in sort of campaigning. We have our yearly World Plant Milk Day event, which is actually in 2 days, the 22nd of August. I'm the conspirator of creator of World Plant Milk Day, which is now an official day, international day. I never thought that I would ever do something like that, but it's silly and hilarious and fun. And it gets reported by various outlets around the world, and they talk about plant-based milk. And getting more support for stuff like that is a big part of my plan as well. How can we put World Plant Milk Day on the map and get big brands sponsoring it and talking about it every single year, and trying to inspire more people to ditch dairy? Because if anything, the dairy industry is one of the most destructive industries on the planet because of what it's doing to the environment. The CO2, the methane emission, the acidification of rivers, and of course the treatment of these beautiful animals. This is an opportunity for us to talk about it. Maybe it's once a year, it's only a week. We have the World Plant Milk Day Dairy-Free Challenge at worldplantmilkday.com. That's like a free service. You go in there, put your email address, and you'll get emails every day for a week with like inspiration for recipes and tips and tricks on how to be dairy free. I'm also working on my very first report, and that is about misinformation. So we're doing a global report on misinformation through the lens of animal agriculture, and we're looking at everything that our big animal ag is doing to disrupt the kind of support for plant-based meats, for the vegan community, the vegan movement, activism, etc., and talk about all the different ways in which they do that, whether it's through bot farms or through articles in mainstream media or ads in the New York Times, double page spread ads in New York Times, or billboards in Times Square. These organizations are spending gargantuan amounts of money on trying to keep the people consuming meat, milk, and eggs. So that report is coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. What else am I doing? Working on some more original content. So I released the first episode of our new series, What Happens When, and it's on our YouTube channel. It's called What Happens When I Eat Soy. It's a fully animated series that debunks the biggest myths around health, nutrition, animals, and the planet. The next episode is going to be called What Happens When We Eat Meat, and that's a kind of short kind of sort of mini docu series about these topics where we did debunk the biggest myths, essentially, and it's all fully animated, and I'll be voicing those, and a bunch of other things I probably forgot. But yeah, just trying to keep growing outside of PBN. What are we reporting on that's most exciting? Again, as I said before, just the food technology and the innovation, the entrepreneurship, all these companies that are launching, despite the media narrative that currently is kind of something that we're seeing every day, where the media is saying people are falling out of love with veganism, people are eating less plant-based meats. These, correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because you're seeing some data that suggests that people are not eating plant-based meats, it doesn't mean that people are giving up on veganism. People are tightening their purse strings. I'll give you a simple example of the financials. Bacon from a pig costs in the UK about £6 per kg. Vegan bacon per kg costs £29 per kg. So, when you look at the economics and the price parity of these products, it's obvious that people can't afford them in a cost of living crisis. So we're writing about that type of stuff and talking about that kind of thing. A lot of vegan brands are struggling to keep selling because people are cutting back, but it does not mean that people are giving up their ethics. And so it's something I want to emphasize, and we are reporting on that and continuing to inspire people to stick with their lifestyle. If you can't afford vegan burgers, then stick with the black beans.
Do you want to touch on COP quickly? Obviously, it's reported that COP is going to be 75% vegan this year. We're doing a lot of work there on site with getting the restaurants ready, getting the food supply chain ready. I think it's a huge move forward to have such a
the COPs over the years have felt very performative, in my opinion, in their effectiveness. Politicians and influential figures kind of jet in literally from all around the world to these events and give off a lot of hot air, make a lot of promises, and then piss off back home and nothing gets done. I think what's interesting about the world today is that a lot more people are active and a lot of young people are activated to speak out at these events, to protest at these events, to hold people accountable. I think, for far too long now, politicians have not been held accountable for the choices that they make, which affect our entire planet. We put a news article out on the 14th of August, which talked about a newspaper clipping from the 14th of August, 1912, where someone talked about how if the pollution from our factories continues to be pumped into the upper atmosphere, it will cause major problems for the environment in the centuries to come. And that was 111 years ago. So, it's the inaction of humanity on this subject is frankly terrifying. We are seeing terrible forest fires, in Maui, annihilating entire towns. We're seeing floods, in India, which are, displacing millions of people. Australia has been seeing huge, terrible forest fires. California, our planet is in grave peril, including our entire species. So I really hope that at the next COP, there's a few home truths being told and some real action taken, because it's frustrating. It frustrates me every day. These people that hold so much power and influence, they have the tools and the mechanisms and the levers to be able to bring the real change to our planet, yet the political will is not there, and it's mostly because of commercial and corporate interest. It's not in the interest of corporations for us to cut back on our carbon. They want to keep making the billions that they make. And so, we've got a big job ahead of us.
We'll certainly try and keep them well fed with plant-based food at the event, so that we can hopefully inspire some change in that respect. Robbie, thank you so much. Really enjoyed speaking to you. It's been super fascinating, and we'll link in all of your personal IG and platforms and those of
definitely.
PBN.
Thank you so much, Loui. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.